The Great Depression arrived late in California, and its impact was muted. There was even a reverse depression in the state. The 1930s saw the coming of age of the California good life. Suburbia, the great outdoors, car culture. Imported from Texas, the barbecue. From Hawaii, brightly colored men's shirts and surfing. Visionaries and eccentrics seemed to congregate at the coast. There was newspaper publisher William Randolph Hearst on the right. On the left, any number of socialists, spiritualists, health faddists, and just plain oddballs. Side by side with the free spirits, there were growing numbers of the destitute. Refugees from the Dust Bowl were arriving by the hundreds of thousands. They joined an underclass of people who had lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings to the Depression. In the sheer numbers of the California poor, there was immense potential power. If someone could capture their vote, he could shake the foundations of the state. By October 1934, it appeared that Upton Sinclair was about to do just that.
We have put life into the old donkey, at least so far as California is concerned.
The men and women who supported Sinclair were on the glory road. They were the nobodies. The people would come to California for a second or a third or even a fourth chance.
Every schoolboy knew of Sinclair, who authored the 1907 expose of the meatpacking industry, The Jungle.
And it created a sensation because everybody had at some point or another to eat meat. And it horrified them to think of the conditions under which their meat produced.
Fewer people knew of Sinclair, the politician. He had run several times for various offices on the socialist ticket, getting nowhere. There was little about Sinclair that appealed to the mainstream. He was the very model of the California eccentric. He ate only uncooked fruits and vegetables. He was an obsessive sunbather, a teetotaler, whose idea of a binge was gorging himself with ice cream. Yet he cherished the notion of a serious run for public office. And one day in 1933, he stunned the Socialist Party by registering as a Democrat. Soon afterward, he declared his candidacy for governor of California. Supporter Morton Newman was there for the curious announcement.
He said in a very offhand way that there was a possibility that he might run for governor and that he might run on the Democratic ticket. And this was the first that anybody had heard of about this.
This socialist in Democratic clothing had a catchy program. End Poverty in California, or EPIC. EPIC called for government takeover of idle lands and factories, which would provide employment for the poor. Land, industry, and poor people. California had a surplus of all three. EPIC touched a nerve.
Rank-and-file socialists supported him, and working people supported him, farmers supported him, people who were suffering in 1934 and who saw Upton Sinclair and his program as a reasonable program. It seemed like a common sense program to take resources that were being unused and turn them over to people who needed them.
It would have been a crank campaign in any other time and place, but this was 1934 in California. In the primary, Sinclair ran away with the nomination. It shocked the country. With the Democratic Party cresting in popularity, Sinclair was now a frontrunner. It went right to the candidate's head.
We are not going merely to end poverty in California, but we are going to show how the whole people can end poverty in civilization.
But in the strongholds of power, in Sacramento and Hollywood, Sinclair was a marked man.
The prospect of putting such an unknown figure, such a naive figure in political terms, such a visionary utopian figure in the chief executive office in Sacramento, sent fear and terror to the oligarchy of this state.
Directly after the primary, the oligarchy struck back. Republicans began looking through Sinclair's books for controversial material, and they didn't have to read too closely.
He had, in one book or another, insulted practically every phase of American life.
The papers overflowed with cartoons and editorials that demonized the candidate. Newsreels put a new spin on the migration of undesirables into the state. They didn't blame the Depression, they blamed Sinclair.
Your inquiring cameraman interviewed 30 stated that they were on their way to California to spend the winter and to remain there permanently if the epic plan went into effect.
Hollywood was fearful of Sinclair, and in fact went so far as to put fake newsreels out with actors posing as Bolsheviks with heavy Eastern European accents saying, well, I'm going to vote for Sinclair.
If he had only faced a Republican candidate, he would have won the election. But a Progressive Party candidate was put up against him, and the Republican Party, of course, did not discourage this.
Despite all the heavy artillery, Sinclair still had the poor and working class vote. As November approached, it appeared as though he might actually carry the day. Even Sinclair was amazed. One thing he had never counted on was winning.
As the days to the final election were approaching, he began worrying about the fact that he might be elected.
It all came down perhaps to one man's vote. On the afternoon of September 4th, Sinclair arrived at Hyde Park. He had taken a week off from his campaign to journey to the shrine of the New Order. With FDR's endorsement, he thought, the governor's office was his. FDR made political small talk with Sinclair, characteristically dodging the main issue. But Sinclair came away from the meeting believing he had the president's support. He had miscalculated. Roosevelt had no intention of supporting such a controversial character as Sinclair, even if he was a Democrat. Then FDR made a secret deal with Sinclair's Republican opponent. If he would pledge not to block the New Deal in California, Roosevelt would promise not to endorse Sinclair.
He was not willing to sacrifice even a marginal amount of political capital in order to take the risk of being labeled once again as a radical.
On Election Day, the ever-hopeful Sinclair delivered a victory speech for the newsreel cameras.
Of course, I appreciate the tremendous compliment which the people of California have paid me in electing me their governor.
The speech would not see the light of day. The final tally was 879,000 for Sinclair, 1.1 million for his opponent. California politics got back to normal. Courting big agriculture, heavy industry, and Hollywood. Upton Sinclair got back to his raw vegetables, his sunbathing, and the thing which, after all, he did best, writing books. And the wily old master of the game got back to the real business of his administration, putting people to work. FDR knew most Americans would trade all the utopian schemes in the world for a pickaxe and a paycheck. He was about to deliver in historic fashion.